I was born in a small town and probably would have died there. Ended my life in the prime of life from drunkenness, like many locals, if it hadn't been for my childhood friend Cot. When he was 13, he visited a big city with his parents for the first time and became sick of it. While the kids dreamed of mysterious islands and treasures, he raved about cities that had everything he thought he needed to be happy. After school, he persuaded me to try a different life, and we left for the capital. At first it was hard: dormitories, part-time jobs, studies, and then it went like on the beaten path. The first good earnings, the two of us organized a business. I got married soon, but Cot still couldn't get married. Girls followed him in droves, but to the knight, which he very successfully portrayed, attached heavy character, jealousy, and the principle of who to love, so the queen. He joked that if he married, he would only marry Star. In general, life got better. I even moved my family closer to me. But I didn't have time for the cat. The old people died. He went to bury them and disappeared. Cot came back 3 months later, gaunt and tired. He offered to buy out his share in the business. He said he wanted to go home. I was amazed. He could call the capital his home, but not that backwater from which we had once miraculously escaped. He called it a hole with undisguised hatred in his voice and insisted that his parents should come to him, as long as he didn't go there himself. And who in their right mind would go from the capital to a miserable town, living with the only factory that was outdated when the city was built and was about to close? He says, I don't get enough sleep at home, but there is fresh air. I've slept well for all the years. And he himself has such bags under his eyes. I tried to reason, at least to persuade him not to sell the house and not to check out. But he did not listen to reason, threatened me, hissed at me not to interfere in his life. That I fought and fought with his sudden delirium and gave up to T.O. hell with it. He wants to ruin his life. What I bought out his share, and we had a terrible fight in the end. And 3 months later he calls, as if nothing had happened, invites me to the wedding that I, of course, agreed. Cot came back 3 months later, gaunt and tired. He offered to buy out his share in the business. He said, you want to go home? That I was amazed. He could call the capital his home, but not that backwater from which we had once miraculously escaped. He called it a hole with undisguised hatred in his voice and insisted that his parents should come to him, as long as he didn't go there himself. And who in their right mind would go from the capital to a miserable town with the only still outdated and unused building in the world? And next to Cat, tall, charming, pleasant on the face, athletic build, always stylishly dressed, well-read and fond of history and archaeology. I was shocked, although I had one thought. Was it a fling? I approached him at the wedding when he was smoking on the back porch of a shabby restaurant. No, you wouldn't believe it. Cat looked up at me with a tired, wan expression. I just can't do it without her. I know it sounds awful. I'm uncomfortable without her, almost to the point of physical pain that I guess it's not love. I don't know what it is, but sometimes you just have to not resist fate. The answer was more than strange, but I couldn't get anything more out of it. The days I stayed with him, he talked about everything but his wife. That he shared his plans to renovate his parents' house, invited me to visit in the summer. And yes, now we call back. He was clearly happy to ask me for news, interested in the affairs of the firm. But when I asked him to come back at least for a while, he answered with a categorical no, that I don't know, even if he did dig up some Star in the backwoods. And how damn right that dug up was. Pale, not ugly, but gray and inconspicuous, with liquid hair and a ponytail, overweight, short. She is afraid of everyone, speaks quietly and mostly nonsense. Her intelligence is even less than her beauty. And next to Cat, tall, charming, pleasant on the face, athletic build, always as to the house, it must be said, stood at the very edge of town. Beyond our street, there was only a sharp downhill slope to the river and fields. No one had built anything there. The soil was bad. We used to play down there when we were kids. It was deserted and creepy. People often drown on that part of the river. Adults explained it by underground springs with icy water. A person fell into the water flow from the underground spring, and his legs cramped up. And in winter, everything was clear, thin ice. Everyone knew that the place was bad for bathing, but the river took 5 to 6 people a year. Among children, there were silly stories about evil ghosts dragging people to the bottom. The reason for the stories was good. On that bank, there were black remains of a burnt village. Evil ghosts from the village and the Devil's Stone were almost landmarks in our countryside, illishly dressed, well-read and fond of history and archaeology, that I was shocked. Our feet brought us to the ladder on our first outing to the countryside. We just walked wherever we could and chatted. The Devil's Stone was a huge boulder on the riverbank with incomprehensible signs carved on it. There were a lot of stories about it, mostly about pagan rituals, and probably they were not far from the truth. Several times we found on it dissected small animals and bird feathers that I don't know if it was a sacrifice or maybe someone just wanted to scare children away from a dangerous place. They said that in exchange for something expensive, the stone could grant a wish, and one believed it. Of course, I remember from my childhood, as a classmate of mine buried her favorite doll nearby, crying and asking her parents to stop drinking that tea didn't come true, of course. Strange thing, by the way, I thought that in time, under its monstrous weight, the stone will already go into the sand at least a quarter. Sitting on a high cliff, I complained to Kat about how badly things were going, asked him to come back again. He looked at the water in silence, and then a bad thought struck me. There were a lot of stories about it, mostly about pagan rituals, and probably they were not far from the truth. Several times we found on it dissected small animals and bird feathers. Already in the evening, sitting over homemade plum wine, he offered to help me with his savings. But my affairs were not so bad as to gut my friend's accounts, especially as there was no work in this hole. He supposed, apparently, to live on them, and I had a lingering hope that he would return to the capital. And suddenly I felt proud that can't I do anything without him? Looking for a new topic of conversation, I looked around the kitchen, noting that it lacked a woman's hand. Everything was neat and clean. Kat was very meticulous in that respect, but it lacked something soulful, cozy embroidery, for example. And there were no feminine things in the bathroom that I asked cautiously, "How long ago did you split up with your ex?" "No, I didn't. She drowned in early May." Strange thing, by the way, I thought that in time, under its monstrous weight, the stone will already go into the sand at least a quarter. Sitting on a high cliff, I complained to Kat about how badly things were going, asked him to come back again. He looked at the water in silence. And then a bad thought struck me that I stood up and, putting both hands on the boulder, loudly asked the universe for money to solve my problems, a lot of it, fast, and that nothing would be done to me for it. The cat was amused. He said he would think about it, since I had already decided to ask the devil for money. In the evening, sitting at home plum wine, he offered to help me with his savings. But my affairs were not so bad as to gut my friend's accounts, especially since there was no work in this hole. He assumed, apparently, that I would not be able to get a job in the country, that I looked around the kitchen in search of a new topic of conversation, noting that it lacked a woman's hand. Everything was neat and tidy. Kat was very meticulous about it, but lacked something soulful and cozy, some embroidery, for example. And there were no feminine things in the bathroom that I asked cautiously, "How long ago did you split up with your ex?" "No, I didn't. She drowned in early May." The cat opened the window and went back to the table and smoked. It's a rare sight. He's never smoked indoors in my memory. We've lived here before. Had an argument in the evening. She ran out into the street in hysterics that I followed her. I thought I'd come to my senses and make up, but it was so foggy. I kept coming back to the house that I ended the morning downstream. He was silent and reached into the nightstand for another bottle. She was found at a fool to soothe her nerves at night by bathing in cold water. I see her sometimes, though. I gotta chill. He said it in his normal, everyday voice, like he was asking what time it was. I grinned and moved the bottle away from him. The cat appreciated the joke, laughed, and, lighting another cigarette, headed for the porch. The fog was thickening. It was a frequent visitor here in the lowlands. That's where I see her. I think she's standing there, calling, and then she comes down to the river. Believe it or not, I wanted to go away 100 times, at least to the city center, but I keep waiting for that stupid fog in the evenings. If only I'd found her then. There, see?
The continuation of the story is already on the channel in the playlist Devilstone.